Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ensemble Network webcast. Thank you to all of our listeners who tuned in today. My name is Lindsay Kajura, Manager of Diversity Initiatives for the Mining Industry Human Resource Council, and joining me today is a very special guest speaker, Kyle Governor, who is one of MiHR's labor market economists. As many of you know, MiHR established its mandate to identify opportunity and ultimately address the HR and labor market challenges in the Canadian minerals and metals sector. The Canadian mining industry faces a significant challenge in establishing a sustainable supply of labor that is able to withstand mining's economic volatility. MiHR, through its labor market intelligence, has identified a number of factors exacerbating this challenge. Canada's aging population continues to have a significant impact, and diverse groups such as women and newcomers to Canada are underrepresented in the mining labor force. Our research indicates that women comprise half of Canada's population and about 48% of its labor force. Yet in the mining workforce, women represent only 17%. Improving this statistic involves a combination of collaborative solutions, from encouraging young girls to pursue math and science studies to building a gender-inclusive awareness of the industry to appointing more women to senior leadership and board positions. Many organizations have realized the need to fundamentally think different about diversity of talent and ways of inspiring inclusion as a means of preparing the workforce of the future. Each year, MiHR produces a national report that provides a profile of Canada's current mining labor force and forecasts for hiring requirements and available talent over the next decade. In this presentation, Kyle will take a deep dive into the key findings from the forthcoming 2020 Canadian Mining Labor Market Outlook Report. This webinar will have a particular focus on labor market demographics, forecasting, and the implications on diversity and inclusion for the sector. So I'll let you take it away, Kyle.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. This is Kyle Governor from MiHR, and I'm here to present some of the findings from our national report this year. Welcome to the webinar. So I thought I should let you guys know a little bit more about me. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm an economist at MiHR, and I've been working here since 2016. I went to the University of Guelph, and that's where I completed my MA in economics. I'm a big boxing fan. I've coached and competed in boxing for a few years now. Manny Pacquiao, aka the Pac-Man, is hands down my favorite fight of all time. One last thing before we move on, it's very, very important to let you guys know that I didn't misspell my name. It is Kyle. Now that you know a bit more about me, I should let you guys know a little bit more about MiHR. The Mining Industry Human Resources Council is an independent, nonprofit organization, and our objective is to identify and address the human resource and labor market challenges facing Canada's mining industry. Each year, we produce a national report that profiles the current state of the mining labor market and forecasts hiring requirements for the next decade. I'll be only covering 3 main topics from the national report in this presentation, but I'll first share with you a brief overview of the national report. In the overview, I will give you the key findings from the 2020 national report and highlights from our 2019 employee survey. After the overview, the next 2 topics of the presentation highlight the main labor market challenges facing Canada's mining industry. The first topic, economic outlook, focuses on current challenges, while the second topic, future hiring requirements, illustrates some labor market challenges that our industry will face in the coming decade. The last section of the presentation highlights the opportunities for a larger, more diverse workforce for the mining industry, which can help the industry alleviate these labor market challenges. To begin, let me share some key findings from our 2020 national report with you. This first bullet shows that there has been 3 consecutive years of employment growth in Canada's mining industry. Unemployment rates in mining and quarrying have been between 2 and 4% for most of 2017 and 2018. The representation of Indigenous workers is high in mining compared to other industries. According to the 2016 census, the representation of Indigenous workers in mining was 7%, compared to 4% of Canada's workforce. According to our projections, the industry may need to hire nearly 79,680 workers by 2030. And finally, the skills most frequently requested from mining industry employers were communication, planning, budgeting, and project management skills for engineering occupations, equipment operation, equipment repair, communication, and teamwork skills for production occupations, and troubleshooting, communication, repair, and welding skills for trades occupations. Here are some of the highlights from our 2019 employee survey. 46% of respondents stated they expect their workforce will stay the same size, and 36% anticipated their workforce will expand over the next 12 months. In addition, most of the respondents reported that two areas of training particularly important were increasing opportunities for developing high potential employees and stronger employee engagement. Most respondents stated their biggest hiring challenges will be finding qualified or skilled workers and upgrading their skills of supervisors and managers. And lastly, 82% stated they have a program for recruiting diverse candidates. About 50% of the respondents stated they have a program to develop a pipeline of diverse leaders. So let us now take a look at the current economic state of the mining industry and some labor market challenges that our industry is currently facing. Real gross domestic product, or real GDP, is an important measure of economic activity because it measures the level of output in an industry. Increasing output or growth in real GDP means that the economy is growing because it is producing more, whereas decreasing output or contraction in real GDP means that the economy is shrinking because it is producing less. MiHR pays attention to real GDP in the mining industry because changes in how much the mining industry is producing usually affects the number of jobs available in the industry. If you look at the graph on the left-hand side, in 2018, real GDP grew in all three mining subsectors: extraction and milling, support services, and primary metal manufacturing, after a tough 2015 to 2016, where real GDP growth slowed down for extraction and milling and sharply declined in support services. The yellow line represents support services, and we saw growth in this subsector in 2018, which was the first time that the subsector grew since 2012. This is a good sign for the industry because this subsector, which includes many contractors, is particularly susceptible to year-over-year movements in commodity prices. Here's a little bit of a fun fact for you guys. According to NRCan, expenditures in exploration grew in 2017 and 2018 after declining each year since 2011. Increased investment in searching for new mining operations is a sign of improved economic conditions and long-term economic growth for our industry. So all this culminates to 3 consecutive years of employment growth in the mining industry after employment declined by 13% between 2013 and 2015, according to this dashed line here. Increased job openings and growing employment is great for the mining labor market, but now the industry currently faces a tight labor market, a situation in which there are not enough unemployed people to effectively fill job openings. I don't want to confuse you guys, so I put a definition of what a tight labor market is, right? And so that you get a bit better of what a tight labor market looks like. Signs of a tight labor market include low employment rates and a high number of vacancies across Canada. This leads to a highly competitive labor market, and wages get inflated in order to compete for talent, reminiscent of how the top tech firms are competing for programmers. Mining usually faces a tight labor market just because most mines operate in very remote parts of Canada. This map illustrates this. Remote mining operations have a limited local labor pool and have to compete for labor in highly competitive mining labor markets such as Sudbury or Rouen Aranda. When these labor markets are exhausted, mining operations have to resort to attracting talent further away from mining operations in even more competitive labor markets, such as Ottawa-Gatineau, Edmonton, St. John, and some other larger metropolitan areas listed in the map. These geographical challenges create a tight labor market, and recruitment difficulties increase with growing hiring needs. In fact, this figure shows the number of unemployed in blue, and the number of job vacancies in orange from Q2 of 2015 to Q4 of 2018. Overall, the figure illustrates that the mining labor market is getting tighter. Job vacancies actually exceeded the number of unemployed persons in the fourth quarter of 2018. In comparison, if you look at Q1 of 2016, there were over 4,000 more unemployed persons than job openings in mining. Recall in one of the previous slides, I mentioned that in 2016, employment in mining just started to grow after significantly declining the previous 2 years. Incredibly though, the mining industry created such a large number of jobs that in only a year and a half, the mining industry closed a huge gap between unemployed persons and job openings that existed in Q1 of 2016 by Q3 of 2017. As a result, unemployment rates hit as low as 2% in 2018. And right now, mining employees may be struggling to find qualified candidates. So in addition to the current challenges I've just highlighted, MiHR provides a forecast of industry future hiring needs in its 2020 national report so that industry stakeholders are aware of the potential labor market challenges in the next decade. The industry currently employs about 208,680 workers. However, we project that given the worst and best economic scenarios, the industry will need to employ anywhere between 182,000 and 235,000 workers by 2030. Our baseline forecast, which is based on current economic situations remaining the same over the next decade, projects that the industry will need close to 207,000 workers by 2030. Although our baseline scenario predicts that industry employment will decline slightly over the next decade, MiHR expects that a very significant driver of hiring needs will come from having to replace retiring workers. In fact, the number of annual retirements shown by the blue bar graph is expected to increase each year over the next decade, starting with close to 5,000 retirements from the industry between 2020 and 2021, which will increase year by year to almost 6,800 retirements in the last year of the forecast, 2029 to 2030. All these retirements add up to significant hiring needs by 2030. The industry's projected hiring needs are roughly 79,680 workers over the next 10 years, and retirements are expected to account for about 73% of baseline hiring requirements. Given that the industry's labor market challenges stem from an inadequate supply of available labor, MiHR has sought out opportunities to increase the labor pool. We found that tapping into more diverse labor groups can help alleviate some of mining's labor market challenges. The ability to attract talent from various demographic groups can help any industry mitigate labor supply challenges. However, the Canadian mining workforce is aging, increasing the need to hire younger workers across different demographic backgrounds. Yet, women continue to be underrepresented in mining. 48% make up the Canadian labor force, but only 15% make up the mining and quarrying labor force. Immigrants represented only 13% of mining industry's workforce in 2016, compared to 23% across Canada's workforce. And in 2016, the representation of visible minorities in the mining industry was 9%, but they accounted for just over a fifth of Canada's workforce. Fortunately, the representation of Indigenous workers is high in mining compared to other industries, at about 7% compared to 4% of Canada's workforce. Like many industries in Canada, the mining industry is aging. The yellow line in this graph represents mining, and in 2018, 19% of the mining and quarrying labor force were ages 55 and over, compared to 10% in 1987. Creating a larger labor pool involves increasing the number of women wanting to work in mining. This graph illustrates the representation of women in mining and other industries. The good news is that mining has successfully increased the share of women in the industry over many years, growing from 6% of women in the mining and quarrying labor force in 1987 to 15% in 2018. However, 15% is simply just not good enough. Likewise, the representation of Indigenous in the mining workforce has improved quite dramatically, from 5% in 2011 to 7.4% in 2016. Moreover, this graph demonstrates that mining is among the industries with the highest representation of Indigenous peoples. At the 3-digit NAICS, which is not shown here in this graph, mining and quarrying has the third highest representation of Indigenous workers at 12%. Only the Indigenous public administration industry at 88% and the fishing, hunting, and trapping industry at 16% had higher representation. Indigenous peoples are one of the most important labor supply groups for the mining industry because mining operations are often located near Indigenous communities. It is critical that mining employers ensure that Indigenous communities can benefit from employment opportunities in nearby mining operations. Improving the recruitment of immigrants and visible minorities to the mining industry can help increase the industry's labor supply. Yet, given the results in the graph presented, it seems that the industry has failed to increase the engagement with these labor groups in recent years. The representation of immigrants and visible minorities hasn't changed much over 10 years, even though they are significantly underrepresented in mining. In 2016, immigrants and visible minorities represented 13% and 9% of the mining workforce, up from 12% and 7% in 2006 respectively, showing that there hasn't been much change there. These labor groups represent a large number of people, making up a significant part of many industries and over a fifth of the Canadian workforce. If mining were to increase their share of immigrants and visible minorities, the industry can grow their labor supply substantially and alleviate some of the tightness in the labor market. However, though, there are recruitment challenges with these labor groups. They typically live in larger metropolitans where mining companies do not usually recruit from, and most of the people in these groups are not aware of employment opportunities in mining. In fact, as someone who grew up in Toronto and in Trinidad and Tobago, a nice warm island, I could surmise that many immigrants and visible minorities are completely unaware of jobs in mining or even of mining as an industry. So successful recruitment of immigrants and visible minorities to the mining industry means increasing the awareness of jobs in mining to these labor groups. So I always like to end my presentations with optimism. Our 2019 employee survey shows that employers in the industry are aware of the need to attract more diverse groups of labor. The yellow bars in both graphs show that 80% of respondents say they have programs in place to recruit diverse candidates, and 80% say they have training programs that focus on embracing differences in the workplace. Thanks everybody for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for all of that information from the report. That's been really helpful to go through it and understand exactly what's in there. So just as we spoke about at the very beginning of this webcast, you have the opportunity as a participant to type in your questions in the chat box on the corner of your screen. So it looks like we do have a few questions already, so I will read them out and allow some time for Kyle to answer. So the first question, what else is there in the national report?
All right, so the national report covers everything presented in this presentation: an economic and labor market outlook, profile and forecast, and it also covers a topic not covered in this presentation, which is the skills that mining employees are currently demanding. This last topic is unique to this iteration of the national report, and it showcases the specific skills MiHR is frequently finding in job postings for mining jobs.
All right, next question. Do you have any statistics on turnover?
Right. So yes and no. We don't have comprehensive statistics on turnover rates. However, our employee survey captured some data on this. Based on our survey, we estimate that turnover for mining companies can be as low as 5% or as high as 18%. The average was about 11% though.
Okay. Where are unemployment rates in mining right now?
Okay. So we track this usually, and we saw that September 2019, unemployment rates were currently around 4% for the mining, quarrying, and oil and gas industry. This data comes from the labor force survey, so we don't have mining and quarrying in specific, but that's a good approximation for the mining industry.
All right, so it looks like we've got a few more questions. Once again, as a reminder to our participants, if you have any questions at all, you can type it in the chat box on the corner of your screen. The next one is, how much effect does trade tensions between US and China have on Canada's mining industry?
All right, so that's a really good question. The trade tensions create a very uncertain and therefore pessimistic baseline economic scenario for us when we do our forecast. And prices, the forecast for prices too have been pretty not optimistic, I'll say. This results in employment levels for the industry by 2030 not being as optimistic as well, and that's a reason for the slight decline in our employment projections.
All right, well, it looks like the last question we have. I saw that you were predicting that hiring requirements will be held at just under 80,000 over the next decade. I don't recall it being this low in previous reports. Why has it changed?
All right, so that's a great question too. I'm sure those of you are familiar with the publication's history or may be wondering the same thing. Unfortunately, in this form, I can't provide a very comprehensive answer because I'll require me to get very technical about statistics and what's going in the model. However, I can tell you that MiHR always and continually adjusts the forecasting model to ensure integrity. The changes made in this report increased the accuracy of the forecast and provided us a better estimate for the effects that changes in the economy has been having on mining employment. As a result, forecasts for the next decade have been updated, and for anybody more interested in, I guess, the weeds of it, we can chat offline so I can let you know more about it.
Great. Well, it looks like that comes to the end of all of the questions that have been presented. So thank you once again so much, Kyle, for sharing your insights and expertise with the Ensemble Network. And thank you all to all of our listeners for your questions and comments. If you have any further questions or concerns that weren't answered in today's webcast, don't hesitate to start a conversation on Ensemble or contact MiHR directly. We encourage you to please stay connected. A recording of today's webinar will be available on the Ensemble site within a few days, and I invite you to review the monthly blog post. This concludes our Ensemble webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day and join us next month for our next Ensemble webinar.